In a city where fortunes rise with the skyline and miracles are sold at a premium, one moment shattered all logic. Harris Caldwell, a cold and calculated billionaire, had spent a fortune trying to help his son walk again. Therapists, surgeons, specialists from around the globe, none could restore what had been lost in that one tragic fall. But on an ordinary morning, as the rain soaked the pavement and luxury cars hissed through puddles, a barefoot girl sitting on the sidewalk stopped him with 7 words that would change his life. "Forever, sir, I can make your son walk again." At first, he nearly laughed. How could a child dressed in rags, sketching on trash with a broken pencil, possibly offer what the world's top doctors could not? But something in her eyes, ancient, steady, and hauntingly sure, froze him in his tracks. Who was she? What did she know? And could it be that hope, long buried beneath grief and logic, was sitting right there in the dirt? What followed was a journey neither of them could have imagined into abandoned warehouses, ancient secrets, and a truth that would not only heal legs but hearts. This is a story about seeing beyond appearances, about impossible hope, and about how sometimes the people we overlook hold the power to perform miracles. It was a gray, rainy morning in downtown New York, the kind where the clouds hung low like they were mourning something. The streets pulsed with life, taxis splashing through puddles, suited professionals rushing with coffee in hand, and umbrellas jostling for space on crowded sidewalks. Everyone had somewhere to be, somewhere important. No one looked down, no one noticed the little things. Except for one little girl, she sat alone, tucked against the side of a cold stone building, her knees drawn to her chest. A tattered, faded scarf clung to her head, barely shielding her from the drizzle. Her clothes were stained and threadbare, and her bare feet, red from the chill, pressed flat against the pavement. Her name was Amira, though no one passing by would ever think to ask. She didn't hold a cardboard sign. She wasn't calling out, asking for change or food. She wasn't doing what most assumed a street child would. Instead, Amira was sketching quietly, intently, on a piece of torn cardboard with a short, splintered pencil. Her tiny fingers were stiff from the cold, but her strokes were steady. She drew with purpose, lines moving with a rhythm far beyond her years. Her bright, amber-colored eyes darted upward often, watching people, studying their faces, then returning to the sketch. People walked past her like she was invisible. Some noticed her for a second, then quickly looked away. A few curled their lips in judgment. Others just hurried by, avoiding her altogether. But Amira didn't seem to mind. She wasn't expecting kindness. She wasn't even expecting attention. Then came the car. A sleek, black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided to a stop in front of the towering glass doors of the Anders Neurological Institute, a state-of-the-art luxury clinic known for its impossible promises and billion-dollar clientele. Its polished chrome gleamed even in the rain. The back door opened and out stepped Mr. Harris Caldwell, tall, clean, shaven, and wrapped in a tailored charcoal gray coat. His face was expressionless, carved from stone, his jaw tense, his mind elsewhere. A man used to power, a man used to control. Behind him, a nurse gently wheeled out Illy Harris's 8-year-old son. Illy was pale, small for his age, with thin legs resting motionless on the padded seat of his wheelchair. His eyes were sunken with fatigue, lips drawn tight, expression blank. He had once been a ball of laughter and energy, until a fall from a second-floor landing in their estate left him paralyzed from the waist down. Since then, silence had replaced his laughter, and doctors replaced his bedtime stories. Harris had taken him across the country, to specialists, healers, surgeons, anyone who promised even a flicker of hope. And every single one had failed. As the pair passed the corner of the street, Amira's eyes lifted from her sketch. She stared at Illy for a long moment, then slowly turned her gaze to Harris. Her voice came out soft, almost inaudible under the sound of rain and tires on wet pavement. "Sir," she said. Harris didn't hear it at first. Then a little louder, "Sir, I can make your son walk again." The words sliced through the morning noise like glass. Harris stopped. The nurse stiffened, instinctively pulling Illy's chair closer. A few pedestrians paused, curious. Someone whispered, "Did she just say what I think she said?" Harris turned slowly. He looked at the girl like she had just spoken a foreign language. Amira's small frame remained still, her eyes, too old for her face, locked onto his. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't pleading. She just stared, calm and certain, like she had just stated a fact. A smirk tugged at the corner of Harris's mouth, part disbelief, part irritation. "Excuse me," he said, voice flat. "I can help him." Amira repeated, "I can make him walk." For a moment Harris didn't speak. He simply studied her, the messy scarf, the trembling fingers, the absurd confidence in her voice. Was this some elaborate scam? Some rehearsed performance? But her eyes, they weren't trying to sell anything. There was no desperation. "Just conviction. Who are you?" he asked, his tone clipped. Amira blinked slowly. "I'm no one," she said. "But I know things your doctors don't." It was so strange, so absurd, that for a flicker of a second Harris's heart hesitated. He was a man of numbers, of logic, of hard evidence. But in that fleeting moment something inside him, something old, something tired, whispered, "What if?" Before he could say another word, the nurse leaned close. "Mr. Caldwell, we're going to be late." Harris glanced at her, then at Amira one last time. He turned away without another word, but he didn't realize that his son, silent for months, was still looking back at the girl, his small hand gripping the armrest just a little tighter. Back in his luxurious penthouse that night, Harris Caldwell stared out across the city skyline, watching the rain trace rivers down the massive glass windows. The glittering lights of Manhattan usually brought him comfort, a reminder of how far he'd come from a middle-class childhood to the top of the tech world. But tonight, the city felt distant, cold, just like the silence that filled his home. Illy had been put to bed hours ago, his small frame barely stirring under silk sheets. The child didn't speak much anymore, not since the accident, not since the hope began to fade. Harris poured himself a glass of scotch and leaned on the edge of the granite counter, trying to shake the memory of the girl's voice. "Sir, I can make your son walk again." He shook his head. "Just a scam." He muttered aloud, scowling. Some desperate kid playing games, and yet her eyes, they weren't desperate, they weren't lying either. That was what bothered him most. He had spent over $2 million, yes, he knew the number exactly, on every type of treatment imaginable. From the best physical therapists in Switzerland to experimental surgeries in Tokyo. He even flew in a controversial spiritual healer from the Amazon, much to his board's disapproval. Every time he returned to the same result, nothing worked, so why did a barefoot girl on the street make his stomach twist with unease? Sleep evaded him that night. He sat in the dim glow of his study, flipping through Illy's old photos. A smiling boy on a swing, running across the yard with their golden retriever Bandit. Harris rubbed his temples. He would have given up his entire fortune just to see his son walk across the room again. By morning, the city had wiped away its tears. The sky was clear, but Harris's mind was not. He told his driver to take him to the clinic, but this time he told them to stop across the street. She was there, same spot, same scarf, same focused eyes, sketching on a piece of cardboard as if the world wasn't moving around her. He crossed the street, ignoring the strange glances from pedestrians and his own security detail trailing behind. "You're serious?" he asked flatly. Amira looked up. She nodded once. "Yes, but not here," she added. "Bring Illy to me tomorrow. There's a place." Harris's brow furrowed. "A place." He looked around, skeptical. "Are you insane? What kind of stunt is this?" Amira didn't flinch. She simply reached into her pocket and pulled out the back of a torn pizza flyer. On it she scribbled something quickly, folded it, and handed it to him without a word. He looked down. It was an address in a part of the city he hadn't been to in decades. "Why should I trust you?" he asked. Amira shrugged. "You don't have to, but if you want him to walk again, you'll come." She went back to sketching like the conversation was over. That night, Harris sat with the flyer between his fingers, staring at it like it was a loaded gun. His security chief strongly objected. "That's a bad area, sir. We can't verify who this girl is. It could be a trap, a kidnapping attempt, I highly advise against taking your son anywhere near. I'm not asking, Harris snapped. I'm going. And so the next morning, under a veil of curiosity and risk, Harris, Illy, and one reluctant bodyguard arrived at the edge of a decaying neighborhood in Brooklyn. The streets were lined with shuttered storefronts and graffiti, covered walls. Children kicked a ball near a rusted fence. It was a different world. Amira was waiting near a crooked stop sign, "Follow me," she said, and without further explanation, she led them through a maze of back alleys, her bare feet moving confidently through puddles and broken glass. They passed graffiti murals, stray cats, and the echoes of a past most people chose to forget. Finally, they arrived. An abandoned warehouse, tall and rusted, loomed over them. Its windows were boarded up, but inside, through a broken door, light flickered. Harris hesitated, eyes narrowing. "You brought us here." Amira stepped through the doorway. "This is where it happened, where I learned to walk again." Inside, the space was astonishing. Old machines and wooden levers hung from the ceiling. Strange herbs dangled in bunches. Candles were lit in jars. Crates of dusty books lined the walls, some handwritten, some bound in leather. It was part workshop, part sanctuary, part something else entirely. Harris looked around in disbelief. "What is this place?" Amira rolled up the legs of her pants, revealing long, pale scars that ran across her knees and shins. "I fell from a building," she said calmly. "Doctors said I'd never walk again." She reached toward a nearby crate, pulling out a strange, intricate brace system made from a blend of old metals and woven cloth. "But someone found me, someone who taught me how to listen, to feel what was broken and help it find its way back." Harris stared, silent. The silence wasn't from disbelief anymore. It was the sound of his certainty cracking. Inside the warehouse, time seemed to stop. Dust floated in the golden beams of sunlight piercing through cracked windows. The space smelled of dried herbs, old wood, and something else, something ancient. Strange contraptions hung from the rafters, ropes, pulleys, and carved tools that looked like they belonged to another era. Harris felt like he'd walked straight into a forgotten world. From the shadows emerged an elderly woman wrapped in layers of colorful fabric, her silver hair coiled tightly beneath a head wrap. Her eyes, a stormy gray, sparkled with curiosity and wisdom. She didn't speak a word. "This is Grandma Noor," Amira said quietly. "She found me when I had nothing, not even the will to live." Harris narrowed his eyes. "She doesn't talk." Amira shook her head. "Not with her voice. She speaks with her hands. Her silence says more than most people's words ever could." Grandma Noor gave Harris a polite nod, then gently cupped Illy's cheek. Illy blinked up at her, then surprisingly smiled. "It was faint but real. She taught me everything," Amira said, watching the interaction. Techniques from the old world before machines and wires replaced intuition, before science decided it knew everything. Harris rolled his eyes, but said nothing. He didn't believe in superstition. He believed in code, technology, logic. Yet here he was, standing in an abandoned warehouse with his son, hoping a barefoot girl and a mute grandmother could do what billions in medicine had not. The first session began awkwardly. Amira guided Illy through strange, stretching movements using ropes and a strange brace fitted to his legs. She chanted softly in a language Harris didn't recognize, while Grandma Noor brewed a steaming tea over a small flame. The smell was earthy, smoky, with notes of cinnamon, clove, and something almost metallic. Harris sat in the corner, arms folded, watching with skepticism. "This is ridiculous," he muttered under his breath, but then, something unexpected, Illy laughed. It was short, sudden, and light. A burst of joy that filled the cavernous room like a melody. Harris's head shot up. His son, who hadn't laughed in months, not through birthdays, not even at cartoons, was giggling as Amira gently tickled his toes while adjusting a pulley system. Harris blinked in disbelief. "You okay, buddy?" he asked. Illy nodded. His cheeks were flushed, and his eyes had a gleam Harris hadn't seen since before the accident. So he stayed. The next day they returned, and the next. What began as strange soon became a routine. Illy drank the herbal teas, followed Amira's guidance, and responded to the gentle touch of Grandma Noor's hands, who always seemed to know just where to press, just how to move his limbs. They used ancient pressure points, combined with breathing rhythms and muscle memory techniques that seemed impossible. By the 5th day, Harris found himself looking forward to the sessions. He still didn't believe it, couldn't believe it, but something inside him was shifting. Then it happened. On the 7th day, as Amira adjusted the brace and whispered something to Illy, his foot twitched. It was small, barely more than a flicker, but Harris saw it. His coffee cup trembled in his hand. "Did you see that?" he whispered. The nurse who had joined them nodded. "Why, died. It's just a spasm," Harris said quickly, as if needing to convince himself. "A reflex, nothing more," but Illy looked up and grinned. "I felt it," he said quietly, his first words in 2 weeks. By the end of the 2nd week, Illy did more than twitch. He stood. Amira braced him on one side, and Grandma Noor stood on the other, her frail hands surprisingly firm. Illy's legs shook like branches in a storm, but he stood wobbling, knees bent but upright, on his own 2 feet. Tears welled in Harris's eyes, though he quickly blinked them away. He stood frozen, hands trembling. He had spent millions, prayed when no one was looking, begged the universe. And now, in a broken-down warehouse led by a girl who barely owned shoes, his son stood again. His world turned quiet, but not for long, because someone else had been watching. Unseen by Harris or the others, a tall man in a gray trench coat had been snapping photographs from across the alley for several days. He had followed them, tracked their movements, watched through shattered glass. His camera clicked softly as Illy stood. Click, click, click. The next morning, everything changed. Harris arrived at the warehouse with Illy, only to find the door ajar and smoke curling from within. The inside was trashed, papers scattered, jars smashed, herbs crushed under boot prints. The strange pulleys were torn from the ceiling, and the brace Amira had used was missing. "Amira," Harris called out, his voice shaking. "Grandma Noor." No answer. They were gone, everything gone. Harris dropped to his knees amid the wreckage, clutching the torn sketch Amira had left behind. An image of Illy standing tall. The miracle had begun, but the girl who made it possible had vanished into thin air. The warehouse had been gutted. There was no sign of Amira or Grandma Noor, just ashes, broken glass, and a single torn sandal lying near the overturned table. Harris stood frozen in the wreckage, fists clenched, heart thundering in his chest. Illy clung to his leg, visibly shaken. "I don't understand," Harris whispered. "Who would do this?" Within an hour, he had his head of security combing the surrounding streets, interrogating locals, pulling footage from traffic and security cams. But the trail was faint, almost deliberately hidden. Whoever took Amira didn't want to be found. For the first time in years, Harris felt powerless. Not in a boardroom, not in a courtroom, but here, in this raw, unforgiving reality, the girl who'd given his son a future had been stolen away, and he would not rest until she was found. He hired a team of private investigators, men who specialized in off-grid disappearances. They traced whispers across the city, talk of a place that wasn't supposed to exist, spoken of only in hushed tones among fringe medical circles. An underground clinic nestled in the woods upstate, hidden within the ruins of an old monastery, a facility shrouded in secrecy. The drive there took 3 hours. Harris barely spoke. Illy, sitting beside him in the back seat, was quieter than usual, his small hand gripping his father's. "Will we find her?" he asked softly. Harris looked down and nodded. "We will." The monastery loomed out of the mist like something out of a ghost story. Crumbling stone walls, iron gates covered in ivy, and a long gravel path that led into darkness. But beneath the ruin, hidden by false walls and decades of silence, was something very much alive. Guards in medical uniforms met Harris at the entrance to the clinic below. They refused to answer questions, even when he showed his ID. "This is private property. Unauthorized access is forbidden." One of them said coldly. "I'm not here for access," Harris growled. "I'm here for the girl you took. Her name is Amira. That name changed everything." The guard's face tightened, and after a moment of hesitation, he led Harris and Ellie down a narrow hallway, lined with thick steel doors. The air grew colder with every step, the lights dimmer, and then through a small, reinforced window, he saw her. Amira, tied to a chair, her wrists red from the rope, her head bowed. Two white, coated officials were speaking to her in low voices, their faces obscured behind masks. Harris didn't wait. He slammed his fist against the door. Open this, now. The officials turned, startled. One moved to block the door. She's a danger to public health. The man said stiffly, she's practicing unlicensed, unregulated treatment. She could be putting lives at risk. Lives, Harris spat. She saved one, my son. Your science failed him. She didn't. They tried to argue, citing laws and protocols, but Harris was already making calls. To lawyers, to journalists, to powerful friends in the health industry. Within minutes, the officials were pale, faced and whispering frantically into their radios. Release her, Harris demanded, or I swear I will expose this entire operation. Every secret you've buried here will hit the front page tomorrow. The threats worked. Within the hour, Amira was untied and escorted out of the room, weak and dazed. Harris rushed to her side, helping her stand. Her lip trembled when she saw Ellie. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shouldn't have helped. I broke the rules. I thought I could do good. But people like me, they only see a beggar with tricks. Ellie reached out and took her hand. His fingers were small, but his grip was strong. You made me feel alive again, he said. Amira's eyes filled with tears. Harris knelt beside her. You're not just a beggar, he said softly. You're the reason my son walks. You're the reason I believe in something again, and now the world is going to know your name. Amira looked away, unsure. But Harris wasn't. He helped her up, supporting her as they walked through the dim hallway toward the exit. Grandma Noor's whereabouts remained a mystery, but Amira was safe, and Harris had no intention of hiding her story. They stepped into the daylight together, and for the first time in days, the sun broke through the clouds. A storm was coming, not of pain but of truth, and Harris was ready to be its voice. Exactly 1 month had passed since the day Amira was rescued from that underground facility. The world had changed, or maybe Harris Caldwell had changed. And now he stood at a podium outside the sleek marble steps of the very same clinic where, weeks earlier, he had brushed off a barefoot girl with nothing more than a sketchpad and courage. Now reporters surrounded him, cameras clicked, microphones stretched forward like vines. His jaw was firm, but his eyes betrayed emotion as he looked down at the cue cards in his hand, then tossed them aside. I don't need a script for this, he said into the microphone, his voice unwavering. The crowd hushed. Behind a white curtain set up behind him, a soft sound of movement stirred. My son, Illy, hadn't walked in over a year. Harris continued, his voice cracking slightly. After exhausting every modern option, after doctors gave up, after therapists told me to accept reality, I found something no machine, no medicine, no money could give me. He turned. And that something, he said, gesturing toward the curtain, was her. The curtain was pulled aside. The crowd gasped. Out stepped Illy, slowly, carefully, but on his own 2 feet. His steps were measured, uncertain, but steady. The crowd fell silent as the boy, once bound to a wheelchair, walked smiling toward the podium, and beside him. Amira, no longer in rags, she wore a simple white dress and a soft blue scarf. Her hair was clean brushed, held back with a clip. But it wasn't her clothes that stunned the crowd. It was the calm confidence in her eyes, the kind only people who had known struggle could ever wear. Illy reached the microphone and said softly, Thank you, Amira, for giving me back my legs, for giving me back my life. A wave of applause broke out, people rising to their feet. Cameras flashed like lightning as Amira stepped forward, blinking in the sunlight. Harris placed a protective hand on her shoulder. This girl, he said proudly, gave me back my son. And now I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure she never has to beg again. He paused, waiting for the audience to settle. I've created the Amira Foundation for Alternative Healing, a global initiative dedicated to discovering, protecting, and nurturing gifted healers like Amira, people who've been ignored, mocked, or punished for practicing what others don't understand, we'll fund research, we'll train the next generation, and we'll never let healing be silenced again." Another wave of applause. This time louder, fiercer, journalists began shouting questions. Is she a prodigy? How did she learn these techniques? What about Grandma Noor? Amira simply smiled. "I'm just someone who was helped and wanted to help someone else." Somewhere far above the chaos, on the rooftop of a nearby building, a faint shadow moved. Grandma Noor stood hidden behind a chimney, her colorful scarf fluttering in the breeze. Her weathered hands rested on the edge of the ledge, her lips curled into a quiet smile. She watched Amira, not with pride but with peace. She had done her part. Amira was free now, seen, believed. And that was all she had ever wanted. Below, Harris wrapped up the press conference. He turned toward Amira, speaking only loud enough for her to hear. "Your gift doesn't belong in the shadows anymore." Amira nodded, tears in her eyes. "You believed in me," she said softly. "No," Harris replied, "you made me believe in something again." As the press swarmed, Illy took Amira's hand, guiding her down the steps. For once, it was him leading her, steady on his feet, the boy who had once been told he would never walk again. And the world watched, because something extraordinary had just happened. And not just the miracle of walking. The miracle of being seen, of being valued, of turning pain into purpose. As they made their way through the crowd, a small child reached out and touched Amira's hand. She smiled down at the girl. "Can you help my brother, too?" the child asked hopefully. Amira bent down and whispered, "Let's try." Because sometimes the smallest hands hold the power to heal broken lives, and sometimes it takes the forgotten to perform the impossible. In a world that often measures worth by wealth, titles, and credentials, a barefoot girl on the pavement reminded us all of something far greater. Faith, hope, and the hidden power in unexpected places. Amira didn't wear a white coat. She didn't have a degree, but she had something no one else did. A gift born from pain, nurtured in silence, and given freely to a child in need. Mr. Harris Caldwell thought he had seen everything money could buy, until he met someone who had nothing, yet gave everything. Ellie's first steps weren't just a medical miracle. They were a walk of belief, a walk toward a world where we see people not for what they wear, but for what they carry in their hearts. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in second chances and everyday miracles. What would you do if a child like Amira approached you with a gift no one else could offer? Let us know in the comments below. Your thoughts matter, and remember, sometimes the person you ignore on the street might just be the one who changes your life forever. Thanks for watching Hidden Realities. Until next time, keep your eyes open. Miracles don't always wear shoes.